this is what the chip sector needed, right? It needed a bright spot. NVIDIA disappointed, which wasn't fair. Marvell disappointed, which also wasn't fair. Both of them beat, but not by enough. They wanted it to be overwhelming. Broadcom is delivering on a beat, and it's a very solid beat. Not necessarily completely surprising, given Google and Meta and Amazon and, all of the major hyperscalers. We're talking a very big CapEx spending despite DeepSeek. This is a very in-your-face DeepSeek moment as well, if we can put it that way. And, you have Hock Tan, the CEO of Broadcom, saying in this earnings statement, we expect continued strength in AI semiconductor revenue. He points specifically to Broadcom's hyperscale partners, saying they're continuing to invest in AI chips and in Broadcom solutions for their data centers. So this is just a testament, really, to the fact that all of the big tech companies are still spending big on AI.
Is this enough to, I'm not going to say save the industry. It doesn't need saving. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Is it enough to change?
Intel needs saving.
Intel
That's
does
for sure.
need saving. That's true. They're still looking for a new CEO, by the way. Is it enough to reverse what we've seen happen since DeepSeek?
I don't know. But one thing I'll say, just on the bullish side of the U.S. chips industry, is there is not enough emphasis put on the fact that what DeepSeek proved is that you could build an AI model at a fraction of the cost.
Did they prove it? Did they prove it?
They did prove it.
Okay.
I would say definitively they came up with some technological breakthroughs that allow that to happen. And Alibaba recently released its own AI model.
We talked about this earlier.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
Okay, that I won't tread on old territory. What I will say is that is all the building of AI models. You know what it doesn't talk to is the maintenance of the AI model, the infrastructure necessary in order to handle the onslaught of customers.
About the inference.
DeepSeek can't even keep up with its own demand. It's having to restrict, and that's where you get into this AI infrastructure. Oh, that's why OpenAI is talking about building like $500 billion worth of infrastructure through Stargate starting in Texas. It's not because it's expensive to build an AI model. It's because it's expensive to keep it up.
So what specifically in Broadcom is different from what we got from NVIDIA? Because you mentioned NVIDIA, you mentioned Marvell, and you said, you know what, that was wrong in terms of them being so beat up. So what's the big difference?
And that's why it's an unfair question, because they all fell really well in line. I think NVIDIA was a beat on several metrics. Maybe this is the market waking up to the fact that, it's not going to be a major, huge, home run beat every single time like NVIDIA. They've had some time to digest NVIDIA. They've had a day to invest Marvell. They're back down to earth for Broadcom, maybe. Not necessarily that Broadcom is different as much as the market is realizing and coming back to earth on some of these expectations.
So the expectations have been reset a little bit.
That's right. That's my working theory, right? We may see Broadcom reverse. That's to be sure. It's only been a few minutes.
And we haven't had the earnings call yet. I should say NVIDIA shares are higher by about 1.1% in sympathy with Broadcom.
And I haven't checked Marvell. I don't know what they're doing, but maybe people are.
It was the worst day for Marvell in 20 years.
AMD is up 0.8%, 0.6% here in the aftermarket.
Is up 1.2% in post-market. Yeah. So maybe the market is like, oops, we thought they'd knock it out of the park every quarter, but it's not necessarily going to be every quarter.
So is it that they talk about the outlook in terms of AI semiconductor revenue? Is that the important one? And they talk about $4.4 billion in the second quarter. That's outlook. What was the estimate? Do we know?
I don't have the estimate right in front of me, but it was a beat. And here's the thing is yes, it is a very big part. As I said, it tells the story of the hyperscalers very well and where they're continuing to put their CapEx. Obviously, the other big part is Apple. I think the last time I checked, Broadcom's market still relied very heavily on Apple demand. I think it's about 15% of their overall. And so I think that people are going to want to listen in on this earnings call and understand where the Apple spending is and whether it's going to be as robust as it has in the past.
Yeah, I'm just looking at the supply chain analysis. It's a favorite function for all of us here on the Bloomberg. It looks like Apple's about 15% of the revenue for Broadcom, followed by Alphabet, Meta. Alphabet's about almost 9%, Meta about 4%. Amazon is just under 1% in terms of their revenue. Just a quick reminder, folks, we're following Broadcom. The stock is now up more than 9% here in the aftermarket. Our read-through from Ian King. Broadcom, a chip supplier for Apple and other big tech companies, gave an upbeat revenue forecast, reassuring investors that spending on AI computing remains healthy. Sales will be about $14.9 billion in the 3-month period ending May 4th. Analysts had an estimated $14.6 billion on average, though there were some projections that surpassed $15.1 billion. We know that there are often those outliers, and I just want to also say Ian reports that Broadcom's report suggests that a historic boom in AI spending is still strong, which is exactly what we've been hearing from our own Lynn, Doan. And again, the stock up about 8.6% in the aftermarket. All right, so yeah, I'm thinking about, you're going to go out and write some research. We're going to have a show tomorrow. And, are we likely to see some follow through? We see the names moving in the aftermarket. Are we likely to see some follow through tomorrow?
I would hope so. I mean, I think that this was a big wake up call. I think that the markets have been able to factor in what they already sold off on NVIDIA and Marvell. I think one big sort of longer term uncertainty and question mark maybe for the Broadcom call is, as you all were talking about right before Broadcom Trump, the trade wars, how they'd affect all of these chip manufacturers. A lot of their supply chains, as you can see on the SPLC function, are abroad, if not all. And so, the question remains how much that will squeeze profits, even if the hyperscalers are spending at the multi-billion-dollar level.
And we know leaders are going to be down in Washington
on Monday.
A lot of tech leaders. But you do wonder, as we just heard from the president, he's still moving ahead with stuff. He may delay, and we'll see whether we get another delay or whether we get changes. But we continue to see the expectations
and whether
that he's
there are
going to stand
carve-outs
pat.
and exemptions.
Exactly.
That's a big question mark this time around.
I'm still looking at the Broadcom chart because I remember 3 months ago we were sitting here looking at the absolute surge following earnings in just a few days, basically from the end of November to early December. To the middle of December, that stock shot up by more than 55%. But since then, shares are down about 28%.
Really
Is that trade war? Is it DeepSeek? What has led to sort of the post last quarter malaise when it comes to Broadcom, or is it the whole chip sector?
It's a combination for Broadcom. It's not just DeepSeek. DeepSeek brought everybody down, right, quite considerably. It is some uncertainty out of DC, but it's also just competition. I mean, Broadcom, let's face it, is not NVIDIA, and it was slow to come around. And, we had a great headline. I was just pulling it up to say it in December where we said Broadcom's NVIDIA moment has finally arrived. That's because it was a bit of a laggard. And now it's being brought down by the rest of the market. So like I said, this was the report that they really needed because they have seen what I saw as like a 22% route through today's close.
Remind us what Broadcom does, because I feel like we throw the semiconductor, the chip makers all into one lump, and then we talk to you or we talk to Ian King or someone else from our BI team.
They get out the whiteboard.
And just say, guys, what they do. So what is it that Broadcom does and why this is significant too with AI?
I remember us talking about the entire chip supply chain from ASML that makes the machines that make the chips to, ARM, which is like the designer of the chips. Broadcom actually fits in two categories. One, it designs the chips and it also supplies and makes the chips. But it also supplies the infrastructure software solutions at the data centers themselves, which is what they were talking about.
So that they can make their own chips that are for what they need?
So that they can connect everything in the data centers.
Okay.
Which is what the CEO was talking about in his statement, not just the fact that the hyperscalers are increasing the demand for their chips themselves, but also the solutions within the AI data centers.